At 9:43 on a Saturday morning, 14-year-old Damian K. searched the list hung on the glass door of the Bayline FC Academy office in Houston, Texas. 12 names sat under the club crest. His name was not one of them. He had just finished a 90-minute academy scrimmage. He scored twice and created the best chance of the match. Parents from the other sideline asked out loud who he was. Damian had trained at this academy for 5 years. His mother, Stacy Gibbs, stood at the fence in her work uniform. She had cleaned this club's buildings for 7 years. Her Saturday shift started in 18 minutes. The list on the door was the first narrow door on a path Damian had dreamed about since he was 6. That path in his head ended far away at a World Cup. The camp promised nothing like that. It led only to the next tryout and the one after it. Damian understood the difference. He wanted the door anyway, and his name was not on it. Before this story begins, I want to know who's with me today. Type your city and your local time in the comments. It's a small thing, but it reminds us that somewhere, right now, a story like this one is real for someone. Now let's go back to that boy's World Cup dream. Stacy walked to the glass and read the list herself. She read it top to bottom, then bottom to top. She did not knock on the office door. She did not ask anyone for a favor. She just read, twice, slowly. A father in a red golf shirt looked her uniform up and down. He spoke loudly enough for the whole walkway to hear. "Guess mopping floors doesn't buy a slot," he said. A few parents looked at their shoes. Nobody laughed, but nobody corrected him either. Stacy did not answer him. Damian leaned close to the printed page and traced the names with one finger. His voice came out small. "Mom, did they spell my name wrong?" he asked. "No, baby," she said. "They left it out." 20 yards away, a man in a plain gray jacket heard every word. His name was Ezekiel Sloan, and he owned Bayline FC outright through his holding company. The club was valued at about $700 million. Sloan controlled the academy budget down to the last training cone. 2 weeks earlier, he had personally approved the money behind those camp nominations. Sloan visited academy sessions once or twice a season, and he had come today unannounced. He had watched the whole scrimmage from behind the corner flag, so he was not confused about what he had just seen. The boy at the fence had outplayed at least 4 names on that list. He could add one name with a 6-second text. He did not send it. His reason was simple, and it was not kind to the boy. A name added by the owner would rescue one child and explain nothing. Sloan had just watched the best player on the field vanish from a list his own money paid for. A list he could not explain was a list he did not actually control. So he chose to understand the machine first, while a 14-year-old stood outside the door and waited for nothing. The office door opened. Academy Director Adam Morris stepped out carrying a stack of Navy folders. Each folder wore a silver logo that read Prime Path Performance Group. Morris moved down the walkway and handed a folder to each selected family. He smiled the smile of a man following a checklist. Behind him, a woman in a Prime Path blazer worked the crowd. She congratulated parents and handed out cards. Sloan watched 3 of the selected boys get steered toward her, one after another, the same woman every time. Her card read Prime Path Talent Group, a player agency. He half remembered that name from a commercial presentation years back, and he could not remember why. Stacy folded the roster copy once and set it in the top tray of her cleaning cart. It lay there beside her gloves, her cloths, and her ring of supply keys. Then she pushed the cart through the service entrance and clocked in. The building had just told her son that he did not count. She had 40 rooms of that building to clean before dark. Damian walked toward the changing area alone, carrying his cleats by the laces. Nobody from the office called after him. The Navy folders went home with other families. The door with the list stayed exactly where it was. That evening, Sloan sat in his office above the stadium's north end. He pulled up the academy's published selection criteria. There were 3 categories, printed for every family to see: coach evaluation, combined testing, and academy tenure, clean, public, and simple. Then he opened the age group files. Damian K's composite score was 92 out of 100, the highest in his year. One selected boy sat at 84. Another sat at 81. Both had joined the academy years after Damian did. Nothing in the files had been erased. Nothing had been inflated. The record still showed in plain numbers that the boy outside the door ranked above two boys inside it. The scores were honest. The list was not. Sloan checked one last field, the line for player representation. The boy with 84 was listed with Prime Path Talent Group. So was the boy with 81. The highest score in the age group had no agency at all. He read those three lines twice, and the pattern did not look like an accident. He walked to a cabinet and pulled the Prime Path sponsorship agreement, 44 pages, $14 million over 5 years. He remembered the headline number, and he remembered signing it between two meetings. He did not remember one single line about youth players. Somewhere inside a contract he had signed in 9 minutes was the reason a boy who had earned the field had disappeared from the list. Across town, Stacy and Damian walked home after her shift ended. The walk took 11 minutes door to door. She had picked the apartment for exactly that reason. Buses did not run when overnight rotations ended, and she would not live far from her son. Rent near the complex cost more, so other things had to cost less. Damian said almost nothing on the way. Near the corner store, he stopped and pulled off his left cleat. Taped inside, it was a laminated magazine picture of the World Cup trophy. He pressed the curling tape flat with his thumb. Then he slid the picture into his jacket pocket instead of putting it back. Stacy saw every second of it. She did not give a speech about dreams or hard work. Some moments a mother should witness and leave alone. They passed a McDonald's and a closed tire shop and climbed their stairs without talking. The picture stayed in his pocket all night. Back at the stadium, Sloan opened the coach's written evaluation. Coach Emily Cantu had filed it 11 days earlier. Her language left no room for doubt. Best decision maker in the age group, composed under pressure, physically ready for camp level. The final line read, recommended for nomination. Then Sloan opened the system's edit history. 9 days ago, the nomination field had been changed. Recommended had become not allocated. The change came from an academy administration account, not from Cantu's login, and it happened after her scores were locked. The coach had chosen the boy. Someone after the coach had chosen the contract. 3 days later, Stacy spent her lunch break at the academy office. She stayed in uniform because 30 minutes is 30 minutes. She waited behind two other parents, then sat down across from Adam Morris. Her questions were short and polite. Which criterion did my son fail? Were his scores wrong? And may I see the written calculation? Morris did not insult her. He reached for a softer tool instead. He explained that this cycle carried a limited number of development partner slots. He said Damian was a valued academy player. He said other opportunities would come in future windows. A parent liaison sat in the waiting area, near enough to hear everything. Stacy took a small notebook from her pocket and clicked her pen. "Could you spell development partner for me?" she asked. The question was quiet, and it landed harder than shouting would have. Morris did not spell it. The term was internal, he said. Stacy then asked whether the words development partner appeared anywhere in the criteria published to families. Morris checked his watch, thanked her for coming, and ended the meeting. The liaison in the waiting area suddenly found her phone very interesting. Stacy did not argue with the closed door. Out in the hallway, she wrote the phrase in her notebook the way it sounded, letter by letter. Under it, she drew one straight line. 7 years inside institutions had taught her a simple rule. The words they refuse to spell are usually the words that matter most. Her overnight rotation started that night at 9. Stacy had worked Bayline's cleaning crew for 7 years, since the year she left a marriage that had turned controlling and unsafe. She had arrived in Houston with an aging Toyota, a little cash, and a 7-year-old boy. The club was the first employer that ever gave her stable hours. She took nights so she could be present for her son's days. Nobody at Bayline knew the building the way she did. She knew which locker room drain backed up before heavy rain. She could hear a failing water valve through a wall. 2 winters ago, at 2 a.m., she caught a burst pipe minutes before it soaked a new training surface. No supervisor had ever sent a second worker to redo her section. Millie Collins worked half of the same shift. Millie had been on the crew for 4 years and knew every rumor in the complex. That night, she watched Stacy copy the phrase development partner onto a clean notebook page. Gently, Millie warned her that academy business was not supposed to concern the cleaning staff. Stacy capped her pen first. "It concerned my child before it concerned my job," she said. Millie let it go because there was no answer to that. The two women split the east hallway and worked toward each other in silence. In her locker sat the notebook, and in the notebook sat one underlined phrase. Stacy did not yet know that the phrase lived inside a $14 million contract. She only knew that a man had refused to spell it. The trophy picture had a history that Stacy carried everywhere. Damien was 9 when he first taped it inside his cleat. He had cut it from a soccer magazine at the library and laminated it with packing tape. When she asked him why it had to ride inside his shoe, he shrugged. "So it knows I'm coming," he said. She had never once promised him that dream would happen. The odds were long, and she did not lie to her son about long odds. Her promise was smaller and harder. Nobody would be allowed to lie about whether he earned the next step. That promise was now the only thing on her mind at 3 a.m., pushing a cart down an empty hallway. Upstairs, Ezekiel Sloan took his first real action that same week. He did not add Damien's name, and he did not call the boys' coach with comfort. Instead, he sent 4 written orders through the club's council. All scrimmage and combine footage would be preserved. Written explanations were required for every selected and every excluded player in the age group. His third order froze the records. No evaluation file could be edited before an internal review finished. The fourth order went to Coach Emily Cantu directly. She was to submit her original signed recommendation sheet on paper, dated. None of this gave Damien a slot. It only made sure the truth could not be quietly cleaned up like a spilled drink. Cantu found Stacy 2 days later in the parking lot after training. The coach kept her voice low and her hands in her jacket. Damien's evaluation was not the problem, she said. His numbers were the best she had scored in 4 years of running that age group. She would not say more, and Stacy could see the woman was choosing her words like steps on ice. Cantu did not know about any contract. She only knew that her recommendations kept dying somewhere above her, and that asking why had never gone well for anyone. She was a witness, not a rescuer, and both women understood the difference. Stacy thanked her and wrote the date in the notebook. Another honest score, another silent override, somewhere between the coach's pen and the printed list. That night at dinner, Damien pushed rice around his plate. A teammate's father had seen Stacy outside the academy office. Word traveled the way it always does. Damien finally asked her to stop asking questions. He did not want to be the kid whose mom complained. Stacy heard the fear under the words, and the fear was the worst part. At his next session, she watched from the fence and saw it on the field. Damien played safe. He passed backward when the forward run was open. He took 0 risks, tried nothing creative, and finished the session without one mistake or one moment worth remembering. Before kickoff, he had laced his cleats without touching the laminated picture. It was still in his jacket pocket at home, where it had lived since the roster went up. Stacy stood at the fence and understood something cold. The club had not just removed her son's name. It had taught him to be afraid of being noticed, and no list correction would fix that by itself.
They did more than remove Damien's name. They taught a gifted boy that being noticed could punish his mother.
So she started asking different people her questions, not the office, the parents. She talked at pickup, outside the fence, in the Kroger parking lot, at a birthday party in a park off Westheimer. She never announced a campaign, and she never used the word lawsuit. She just asked what other families remembered, and she wrote it down. Ordinary records began to surface, the kind institutions forget that families keep. Old roster photos saved on phones, evaluation emails from past seasons, screenshots of academy announcements, dates scribbled on kitchen calendars, and messages promising children other chances in future windows. Farrah Lamb's boy had topped his combine group 2 seasons ago and missed the camp list. The family later paid for agency representation because someone hinted it might improve access. Eva Roach's son had been skipped the season before that. He transferred to a club in Dallas, made their nomination list in 1 year, and proved ability was never his problem. Valentina Hurst's daughter had simply stopped attending trials after her exclusion, and Valentina had never known other families got the same speech. By the end of 2 weeks, Stacy had 6 cases across 3 seasons. Every case followed the same shape. The excluded child met or beat the published criteria. The replacement child was represented by Prime Path Talent Group. The family got vague words about limited slots, and every score in the files stayed clean and untouched. Millie Collins helped with one piece nobody else could supply. She and Stacy had worked several of the roster posting nights, and Millie remembered dates because she logged overtime carefully. She also remembered seeing Prime Path Blazers meeting families in the atrium on those same evenings. Millie confirmed timing. She never found the cause, because the cause was not hiding in a hallway. Stacy ruled out coincidence 1 line at a time. She wrote 6 children's names in her notebook. Beside them, 6 dates. Beside those, 6 replacement names, each one a Prime Path client. Under the columns, she wrote 1 sentence. They're not picking players, they're filling a contract. Her next decision took less than a minute. She would not email this to anyone. Emails get forwarded, summarized, softened, and buried in folders. A notebook has to be looked at while its owner watches you look. She would carry it to the top of the building herself. On Tuesday morning, Stacy walked into the stadium's executive lobby without an appointment. Security knew her face and assumed she had entered through the wrong door. She corrected them calmly twice. She had evidence concerning academy selection and the owner's sponsorship agreement, and she would wait. The word sponsorship traveled upstairs faster than her name did. Sloan agreed to see her within the hour. He had spent a week staring at an agency pattern he could not explain, and now a cleaner from his own crew was using the word sponsorship in his lobby. The meeting happened at his desk, with the door open at her request. She did not sit until offered, and she did not thank him for his time. She placed the notebook on the desk, opened it to the marked page, and turned it to face him. 6 qualified children, she said. 6 Prime Path replacements. 3 seasons, the same administrative language every time, and every change made after the coaches finished their scores. Sloan read the columns twice, then looked up. He asked how she had found what his executives never noticed. Your systems only record the decision, she said. Parents remember what happened before it. Sloan wrote that down, which surprised her. Then he told her what his own review had found. Honest scores, a locked coach recommendation, and 1 edit made from an administration account 9 days after her son earned the top number. Then he gave her the deadline because he had learned it that morning. The National Futures Program allowed 1 corrected nomination cycle per age group. The portal for corrections closed in 6 days. After that, Damien would not lose soccer, and he would not lose his future. He would lose this year's wide door, and the next real entry point sat 2 years away and much narrower. 6 days. Stacy absorbed the number without blinking. Sloan now held her handwritten list, the coach's paper recommendation, the score contradiction, the agency connection, and a clock. He told her he was requesting the complete Prime Path agreement from legal, every page and every appendix. He said it like a man who suspected what he would find and hated the suspicion. Stacy closed her notebook and stood. At the door, she turned back once. "Don't call me when you find a way to add one name," she said. "Call me when you find out why 6 disappeared." Then she went downstairs, changed into her uniform, and cleaned the East Concourse until 6 a.m. The agreement arrived in Sloane's office the next evening in a gray legal binder. 44 pages, tabbed and flagged by no one, because no one had ever been asked to flag it. He sent his assistant home and read it himself, line by line, with a legal pad beside him. $14 million over 5 years sat in bold on page 2. The trouble was not on page 2. The trouble was on page 40, in an appendix titled Development Partnership Provisions. One paragraph, clean and gray as concrete. Athletes represented by the sponsor's affiliated agency would receive priority consideration in circumstances of limited availability. No guarantees, no quotas, no ugly words, just priority whenever the doors got narrow. Stapled behind it sat an implementation memo he had never seen. It translated the clause into daily practice for academy administrators. When slots are capped, sponsor agency clients fill first unless a written exception is approved. That single sentence explained everything at once. Coaches could score honestly, administrators could follow policy, and children like Damien could vanish without anyone ever typing the word rejected. On the final page, Sloane found his own signature. He remembered the day now with terrible clarity. 9 minutes between an investor call and a stadium construction meeting. He had read the headline value, asked 2 questions about logo placement, and signed. Legal had reviewed it, and the board had approved it, and none of that changed a single name on a single list. His first hour with page 40 was spent building defenses. Nobody used the word guarantee. The sponsor funded scholarships that real kids really used. He had never intended harm to anyone's child. The defenses were all true, and by midnight, he understood they were all worthless. Intent does not restore a name to a roster. He ordered the audit expanded to the full 5 years of the agreement. Within 2 days, the 6 cases in Stacy's notebook became 11 confirmed cases. 2 of those children, now 16 and 17, had already quit competitive soccer entirely. Sloane sat alone with the printout and said it out loud to an empty office. "I didn't approve a sponsorship. I approved a system that made money decide which score mattered." The realization changed nothing yet, because knowledge is not a decision. And while Sloane sat with his printout, other people in the building were making decisions of their own. Word had reached Adam Morris that an employee was contacting academy families. Word had reached the Prime Path account manager, a composed woman named Megan Preston, that allegations were circulating with dates attached. Neither of them raised their voice about it because raised voices leave marks. On Thursday morning, Stacy found a note taped inside her locker. It requested her presence in conference room B at 11:30, before her shift technically began. She had cleaned conference room B perhaps 100 times over 7 years. She knew which chair wobbled and which window never quite closed. She had never once been asked to sit down in it. Morris sat on one side of the table with a human resources manager whose badge read Employee Relations. A laptop faced the room, and on its screen sat Megan Preston, introduced only as a partner representative observing for compliance. Nobody accused Stacy of lying. Nobody said the word notebook or the word families or her son's name. The meeting had been built so that none of those words would be needed. Instead, they read her a policy. Parents of children in active academy evaluation could not hold facility access roles during an open selection dispute. The rule existed for security and integrity reasons, the HR manager explained, and it applied equally to everyone. It had been on the books for 6 years. It had never once been applied to a cleaner whose child was already enrolled, and everyone at the table knew that, and nobody said that either. Stacy asked one question in the same flat tone she used for supply orders. Could she have the policy in writing, with the date it was adopted and the date this application of it was decided? The HR manager glanced at the laptop before answering. which told Stacy more than the answer did. A copy would be provided through proper channels, he said. She wrote the words proper channels in her notebook while they watched her do it. Then came the decision they had walked in carrying. Her cleaning contract was suspended pending review, effective immediately. Her pay was withheld until the review concluded, and no end date was scheduled. Nobody could say who would conduct the review, or when it would begin, or what would satisfy it. The language stayed polite from the first sentence to the last, and the politeness was the frightening part, because polite things are repeatable. They asked for her access keys before she left the room. Millie Collins was restocking the supply closet across the hall and saw the whole exchange through the open door. Stacy unclipped the ring from her belt, 7 years of brass and steel, and set it on the table without letting her hand shake. There were 11 keys on that ring, and she could have named every door they opened with her eyes closed. She had unlocked this building in the dark and sealed it again at dawn more times than anyone upstairs could count. Now she could not walk past the lobby. Not because her work had slipped, and not because any rule had actually changed. She had asked why her son's score did not matter, and a policy had been found to answer her. The HR manager slid the keys into an envelope and wrote her name on it. Watching her own name go onto that envelope was the closest she came all day to losing her composure. Millie followed her to the parking lot and did something quietly important. She photographed her own shift log for the week with the date of the suspension circled in pen. She wrote down the time of the meeting, who attended, and the exact phrase, pending review, while it was fresh. If anyone later claimed the suspension had nothing to do with the notebook, the timing would tell its own story. Millie could not fix anything, but she could make sure nothing got blurry. Doing it cost her something, and both women knew it. That evening, Millie's supervisor mentioned casually that crew members should stay clear of open disputes. He said it while checking a clipboard without looking up. Millie said she was only keeping her own record straight, which was true. She kept the photographs anyway, and she slept badly for a week, and she never once suggested Stacy stop. Stacy drove home at noon through streets she normally saw only after midnight. The daylight made everything feel misplaced, including her. She passed the Kroger and did math at a red light. Rent was $1,240, due on the first 11 days away. Her checking account held $611 after groceries, and her final paycheck would now be short by 4 suspended shifts. The printed notice on the fridge did the rest of the math for her. Late payment added a $75 fee after the 5th. She called the property office that afternoon and asked evenly about partial payment options. The woman on the phone was kind and unhelpful in the specific way systems train people to be. Stacy wrote the woman's name and the call time in the notebook on a new page because that was now simply how she moved through the world. She did not hide any of it from Damien because she did not run that kind of house. He came home from school, saw the notice moved from the fridge to the table, and asked. She told him about the meeting, the policy, and the keys in plain words, without editorializing. He sat for a long time with his hands flat on the wood. Then he offered the only thing a 14-year-old has to offer. "I can quit," he said. "You didn't take my job," she answered. He shook his head because he had already done the math a child should not have to do. Training fees waived through her employment, gone. Her income, gone. His name, the cause of both, at least the way he counted it. "But they took it because of me," he said. "No," Stacy said. "They took it because I wrote down what they did." He did not look convinced, and she did not pretend the sentence had fixed him. That night she passed his door and saw the laminated trophy picture lying in his desk drawer, face down, next to old birthday cards. Guilt does not leave a child on schedule, and neither does a dream. And for now, the two of them were sharing a drawer. Sloan learned of the suspension on Friday, secondhand, from the audit team. Nobody had asked his permission, and nobody had needed to. Contractor staffing decisions ran 2 levels below him, through a facilities management chain he had never examined in his life. He spent an hour tracing how the decision had traveled, and the route disturbed him more than the destination. Morris had flagged a concern, Preston had referenced the policy on a compliance call, and HR had executed, each step small, each step defensible, each person able to say they had followed procedure. It was page 40 again, wearing a different shirt. No single person had decided to punish a mother for asking questions. The system had assembled the punishment out of clean parts, while everyone kept their hands visible. Sloan understood, sitting with that org chart, that firing one person would change nothing. The machine would simply root around the vacancy. That evening, he drove himself to her building, alone, without counsel or staff or anything in his hands. He parked his Audi between a work van and a faded Corolla and walked up 2 flights past a stroller chained to the railing. Stacy let him in because refusing would have answered nothing. He stood in a small, spotless kitchen that smelled like dish soap, and he did not pretend to be comfortable, and she did not help him become so. On the table between them sat the rent notice, and neither of them moved it. He said the thing plainly, without a lawyer's cushion around it. His signature was on page 40 of the Prime Path agreement. The mechanism that erased her son's name existed because he had approved it in 9 minutes, without reading who would carry it. The suspension of her contract had been executed under his roof by his chain of command, using his policies. He was not there to apologize for other people, he said, because the other people had all been following him. Then he put his offer on the table, piece by piece. Immediate reinstatement, effective tomorrow morning, with the suspension erased from her record as if it had never happened. Full back pay for every withheld shift, processed within the week. And Damien entered into the camp nomination through an owner's discretionary slot, a mechanism that legally existed, completed and submitted days before the portal closed. Every piece of it was real, fast, and entirely within his power, and he could see her weighing it. Stacy looked at the offer the way she looked at a stain she was deciding how to treat. She was $629 short of rent. Her son had stopped touching his own dream, and the man in her kitchen could end all of it by Monday. She let the silence sit long enough that he understood she had actually counted the cost of refusing. Then she refused, and she told him exactly why. Put my son on that list by phone call, and you teach the club that names only matter when a rich man makes one call. Sloan started to answer, and she was not finished. Fix the clause, or leave both of us where you found us. A private exception would rescue Damien and preserve everything else, she said. The 6 families in her notebook would stay unreviewed, and the 11 in his audit would stay buried. The next unrepresented child would be replaced on schedule next season by the same quiet machinery, and her son's earned place would be converted forever into a favor he owed a billionaire, a debt attached to a 14-year-old like a tag. He asked whether she understood what terminating the clause could cost. Arbitration, lost funding, a board war, maybe millions, maybe programs that served kids with no part in any of this. I know what keeping it already cost, she said. You just never received the bill. Sloan stood in her kitchen a moment longer, thanked her, and left without promising anything. Through the window, she watched him sit in his parked car for 4 full minutes before the headlights came on. The board met on Monday in a glass room above the north stand. General counsel presented first, and the consequences were not imaginary. Suspending or terminating the priority clause could trigger arbitration under Section 12 of the agreement, with Prime Path entitled to seek repayment of a portion of the sponsorship value already received. The sponsor could also walk from the remaining years outright. 3 programs ran on that money: a scholarship fund, an equipment program, and a summer community league, together serving several hundred Houston kids who had never heard of Page 40. The club's longest-serving board member, a man who had managed money his whole life, put the objection cleanly. One family's disappointment cannot justify destabilizing the academy, he said. Sloan did not answer with a speech because he had learned something from a woman with a notebook. He answered with pages. Stacy's 6 cases went around the table first, and independent counsel followed with the expanded audit showing 11, and the room got quieter with each copy passed. Coach Cantu's preserved records went around next, and they proved the ugliest fact available. No score had ever been falsified, and every merit ranking had been overridden afterward, cleanly, by policy. Megan Preston, invited to respond for Prime Path, stayed perfectly calm on the screen. Priority consideration was standard commercial language, she said, a support framework, never a guaranteed outcome, and nothing in the agreement compelled any specific club decision. Technically, she was right, and the technical rightness was the entire design, and Sloan watched two board members realize that in real time. Stacy was invited into the second half of the meeting at Sloan's insistence. She came in her own clothes, carrying 6 typed pages she and 2 other parents had built at her kitchen table over a weekend. Each page cross-referenced published criteria, original coach scores, final allocations, agency representation, and dates, 1 child per page. She walked the board through them without raising her voice and without once asking for sympathy. The moral problem and the contractual problem are the same 6 pages, she told them. The finance member warned Sloan directly that acting alone risked millions of the club's money and possibly the sponsor relationships beyond Prime Path. Stacy looked at Sloan, not at the board member, when she answered. "Risk something that's actually yours first," she said. Nobody in the glass room spoke for a moment. The sentence did not accuse him of anything except the one thing that was true. Sloan acted 2 days later under his sole ownership authority in writing. He signed a suspension and termination of the priority pathway mechanism inside all club academy decisions, effective immediately. His order reopened every current limited slot decision and commissioned an independent review of all 5 years of selections, with every record preserved under legal hold. It established a temporary outside evaluation process run by the National Futures Program itself. And it prohibited retaliation against any employee or parent cooperating with the review, in language pointed enough that everyone in the building knew whose suspension it described. He could not sign away the financial fallout, and he did not pretend to. To keep the 3 programs alive through the dispute, he committed bridge funding from his own holding company, not from the club's operating budget. Arbitration costs and replacement program money would be charged against ownership distributions, meaning his own annual take, before a single academy line item could be touched. Prime Path's formal breach notice arrived within 24 hours. 2 board members put resignation threats in writing, and Sloan signed anyway. For the first time in his career, his signature cost him something before it cost somebody below him. He had signed hundreds of documents that moved consequences downward onto vendors, staff, and families he never met. This one moved the bill upstairs to the only office where it had ever belonged. He kept a copy of it in the same drawer as the Prime Path agreement, so the 2 signatures could face each other. If the man who signed the clause just tore it up himself, subscribe, because the sponsor was not going to let 5 years of access disappear without a fight. Prime Path did not sue anyone that week, and it did not call a press conference. It did something quieter and smarter. Envelopes began arriving at the homes of affected families, hand-delivered by courier, marked confidential. Inside each one sat a private settlement offer on cream paper. The offers were generous, specific, and built to be signed fast. The packages varied, and that was the point. Cash payments, training credits, free representation services, and in 2 cases, guaranteed showcase invitations. Every offer carried a confidentiality clause and a waiver of future claims. Every offer carried a signing deadline that landed before the camp nomination portal closed. The message underneath the polish was simple. Take the money, sign the silence, and do it before you can compare notes. Stacy's envelope arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Her number was large enough to cover 4 months of rent with money left over. She did not tear it up for pride, because pride does not pay a property office. She laid it flat on the kitchen table next to the rent notice and calculated exactly what it would solve. It would solve everything for exactly 1 family, 1 time. Then she opened her notebook and called the 6 families, one by one, over 2 evenings. Farah Lamb had received an offer too, a smaller one, with a different explanation attached. Eva Roach's offer was larger, since her son's Dallas success made her case the most provable. Valentina Hurst had been offered training credits her daughter would never use, because her daughter had already quit. Each family had a different number, a different story, and the same deadline. The pattern told Stacy what the papers would not. Prime Path was pricing each family's silence separately and counting on them never speaking. So she spent 2 days making sure no one signed alone in the dark. She did not tell anyone what to choose, and she refused to shame anyone leaning toward yes. Farah's family needed the money badly, and Farah's son's window was already gone, and those facts were real. Her only rule was information. Before anyone signed, they would know the other offers existed, know the independent review was coming, and know a lawyer had read the waiver language for free. A parent who signs with open eyes has made a choice, she told them. A parent who signs in the dark has been managed. 2 families ultimately accepted their offers, and Stacy drove one of them to the signing herself because leadership is not forcing people to match you. The pressure kept climbing from every direction at once. Megan Preston sent the club formal notice that all Prime Path funding would pause pending resolution. A Houston sports reporter, working the phones, learned that Bayline had quietly reopened academy selections and started asking why. The camp portal deadline shrank to 48 hours. Stacy's suspension remained technically unresolved, and Damien still held no nomination at all. Then the club posted the announcement Sloan had ordered. An independent open evaluation would be held for every still eligible affected player in the age group, judged entirely by an outside assessor. 4 children remained age eligible under the program's rules. Damien K. was one of the 4. The evaluation was set for Thursday, 2 days before the portal closed, because there was no later day left. The National Futures Program assigned the assessor itself. A veteran evaluator named Valentina Hurst was ruled out for obvious conflict, so the program sent a man with no Houston ties at all. His name was Ezekiel. No. The program sent an independent evaluator named Adam. No, again. The roster of clean names was thin, and the program settled it simply. They sent a senior scout from their national staff, a precise, unsmiling woman named Farah, no relation to the Lamb family, and the club published her credentials in full so nobody could question the result afterward. Thursday came gray and warm. The evaluation began at 7:10 a.m. on the Academy's East Field. The nomination portal would close at 5 p.m. sharp, with no extensions, because federal-style program deadlines do not bend for anyone's story. The scout had to submit written rankings before the club could enter a single corrected name. Reporters were kept outside the designated fence line, and Sloan made sure no cameras turned the morning into a show. Stacy stood behind the far fence, and the strangeness of it pressed on her. For the first time in 7 years, she was at the facility with no cart, no keys, no uniform, and no right to enter a single employee door. Her suspension was still active on paper. She was there only as a mother, which was the one credential nobody had figured out how to revoke. She kept her notebook in her jacket pocket, closed. Damien had made his own decision the night before at the kitchen table. He was not playing to save her job, and he was not playing to punish anyone. He was playing because the field was the one place where the truth got written in real time. Before he left the changing area, he taped the laminated trophy picture back inside his left cleat. He did not tell his mother, but she noticed the way he checked his laces twice. The scrimmage format was simple. 2 40-minute halves with mixed teams of academy players and the 4 affected boys. Damien did not explode out of the gate, and he did not need to. In the 9th minute, he released a pass 1 touch earlier than anyone expected, and a teammate walked into open space because of it. In the 14th, he lost the ball under pressure and sprinted 30 yards to win it back before anyone asked him to. The scout's pen moved both times. His goal came in the second half, and it was not spectacular. A cross came in low, cleared badly, and Damien was already standing where the clearance landed because he had read it 2 seconds early. One touch to settle, one to finish. No celebration beyond a fist at his side. 10 minutes later, he took a hard, fair challenge that put him on the ground. He got up, waved off attention, and jogged back into shape without a word. Another affected boy, Eva Roach's nephew by marriage, a quiet, left-footed defender, also had the morning of his young life. That mattered as much as anything Damien did. A fair process is not a spotlight for one child. Opened properly, the door lets through everyone who earned it. The scout filled a second page of notes on the defender alone. Adam Morris watched the whole evaluation from the touchline with his arms folded. Nobody had required him to attend, and he had come anyway. Somewhere in the second half, watching Damien organize teammates he had met 90 minutes earlier, Morris understood what 5 years of the clause had done to him. He had stopped watching children play the moment an agency field appeared in their file. The performances had been there all along, and he had trained himself not to see them. The final whistle came at 3:40 p.m. The scout worked alone at a folding table with her scoring sheets while the portal clock ran. At 4:26 p.m., she signed her written report and handed it to the club's compliance officer with the program observer watching. Damien K. ranked second of the four, high enough for one of the available nominations. The left-footed defender ranked first, and 2 nominations existed, and both were earned. At 4:41 p.m., the corrected nominations were entered into the portal. At 5 p.m., the portal closed for the year. There was no applause, because Sloan had kept the crowd small and the cameras out, and because paperwork does not cheer. Damien walked off the field, looked across the grass, and found his mother behind the far fence. Stacy reached down and touched the side of her own shoe. He understood the message across 60 yards of grass, the picture in his cleat, the one that was supposed to know he was coming. His name was on the list now, entered through the same scoring system that had always said he belonged there. No owner had typed it, no favor had carried it, and no one would ever be able to say otherwise. Damien pressed his thumb once against the outside of his left cleat and walked to the changing area. Sloan watched the portal confirmation from the compliance office and did not touch the keyboard. He had wanted badly to be the one who fixed it. Standing there, he finally understood why Stacy had refused him in her kitchen. His hands off the keyboard was the fix. The system working without him was the entire point. Part 5 of 5. Reporters were waiting by the parking lot when the families came out. One of them asked Stacy to stand beside Ezekiel Sloan for a photograph. She declined, politely and completely. When she spoke, she stood with the affected families instead, Farrah Lamb on one side and Eva Roach on the other. "He didn't discover my son," she said. "He stopped a contract from hiding him." Then she read her terms from a single notebook page because she had not come to share a feeling. She had come to close a door permanently. A permanent ban on any sponsorship language influencing selection priority, independent panels for every limited slot nomination, written score explanations available to any family that asked, and a documented appeal process with real deadlines. She kept reading, and the list did not soften. Annual outside review of selection outcomes, published in summary. Her own full reinstatement, complete back pay, and the suspension struck from her employment record. Written protection from retaliation for every cooperating parent and employee. A rotating parent advocate seat with genuine review authority, and one oversight seat chosen by cleaning, security, maintenance, and facility staff themselves, not appointed from upstairs. Nowhere on the page was a demand that anyone praise the owner. The club signed the employment resolution before Stacy worked another hour. Her back pay arrived labeled as owed compensation, because she had refused any wording that resembled a gift. Adam Morris was removed from unilateral allocation authority while the review continued. Nobody pretended he had acted alone, because the honest chain was longer than one man. The contract created the incentive, leadership signed it, and administrators carried it out in clean language, one cycle at a time. The cost of undoing it arrived on schedule, and it was not small. Within a month, PrimePath terminated the remaining years of the agreement, and arbitration began. 2 board members resigned, quietly, citing direction. 3 academy programs needed emergency replacement funding to survive the year. Sloan's holding company provided a multi-million-dollar bridge, and the club cut commercial distributions rather than touching a single youth scholarship. The independent review reached back through all 5 years, family by family. Some remedies were financial because there was nothing else left to offer. 2 children from the earliest seasons had already quit competitive soccer, and no signature could return them to the age or the confidence they had when the list first skipped them. Sloan's decision did not erase that, and the story of those 2 boys stayed unfinished. Accountability paid what it could not travel backward. By the time arbitration and settlements ran their course, the clause had cost Sloan 7 figures of his own money. He never once said the number out loud in public because he understood how it would sound. Money leaving a rich man's account is not absolution. It is only the bill finally reaching the correct address, years late. Several months later, Damien attended the National Futures Identification Camp with his age group. He roomed with a midfielder from Ohio and a keeper from New Jersey, and he called home twice. Nobody at the camp promised him anything about future selection, because that is not what the camp was. His name sat on a roster produced entirely under the new independent process. Nobody had needed to ask an owner to insert it, and the laminated trophy picture rode inside his left cleat the whole week. At the next Bayline home match, Stacy sat in the family section for the first time, off the clock, out of uniform, holding a Coca-Cola she had paid for like anyone else. Down on the concourse, workers she knew by name pushed carts she knew by sound. She was present that night as exactly one thing: Damien's mother. It was enough, and it had always been enough. The structure she demanded outlived the headlines. Academy selection now passed through an independent panel every cycle, with written scores any family could request. The parent advocate seat rotated on schedule. One permanent oversight position belonged to the facility staff, voted on in the break room, and the first person elected to it was Millie Collins. Independent evaluators and outside reviewers do essential, unglamorous work, and the club had finally learned to treat that work as protection instead of interference. Families who ever face concerns in youth sports can also turn to general resources like the U.S. Center for Safe Sport for reporting guidance. The story ends where Stacy's nights had always run, on an ordinary overnight shift. Her keys were back on her belt, all 7 years of them. At 2 a.m., she worked the long hallway that led toward the first-team locker room, the same tile she had kept clean through 2 head coaches and 1 championship run. Damien might walk this hallway as a professional one day, or he might not. The difference now was simple and permanent. The next decision about him would be made from his performance, not from an agency field buried in a contract. Upstairs, the owner's office held no framed jersey and no photograph of a billionaire standing beside a boy. No newspaper article hung anywhere praising anyone. 2 frames sat on the wall behind the desk, where Sloan could not avoid them. The first held page 40 of the sponsorship appendix. The priority pathway clause struck through in his own handwriting. The second held the restored evaluation scores of 11 children, printed plainly, names and numbers together. He saw both every time he lifted a pen, and that was the point of hanging them. This is a work of fiction. Bayline FC, Ezekiel Sloan, PrimePath Performance Group, PrimePath Talent Group, the National Futures Identification Camp, and every character in this story are entirely fictional. MLS appears only as a real-world league backdrop, and no real club, federation, sponsor, academy, agent, scout, roster, or tournament is depicted, accused, or represented here. The World Cup appears only as one child's distant personal dream, and this story does not claim that any camp leads to a World Cup roster. He signed a 9-minute contract that quietly replaced qualified children for 5 years, then tore the clause up and accepted the cost. Does undoing it publicly settle the debt, or was 5 years already too late to repay?
Page 40 no longer chose their dreams. Comment your thoughts and subscribe to Malrick Coleman for more hard-earned justice.